everyone. My name is Sumant Sharma, co-founder of CSItizen and leader of the Fundraising and Scholarship Impact Team. I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's Citizen Speaker Series event featuring Alex Jones.
My name is Alex Hamill, and I'm also a co-founder of the Citizen Speaker Series. I'm thrilled to have Alex Jones here with us tonight and have him on campus. We're going to start with a 40-minute fireside chat moderated by Cole Cherian, and then we'll move to a 20-minute audience Q&A moderated by Sumant. And during the Q&A, you'll all have the opportunity to ask questions.
Citizen Speaker Series is a student-led and student-created speaker series dedicated to celebrating stories of positive social impact and empowering the next generation of social entrepreneurs. To fulfill our mission, Citizen sources speakers with personal, compelling stories of impact and shares them in an engaging manner. In lieu of a traditional speaking fee, our speakers are recognized with a Citizen Scholarship, which provides a full ride to high-achieving students with demonstrated financial need in the area.
None of this would have been possible without all of the contributions of the following. The Citizen Impact Teams, Billy Mullray in the Malvern Prep TV studio, Mr. Patrick Sillip in the Malvern Prep leadership team, Father Lou Delfra, Mr. Michael Reardon, Mr. Muntz, Miss White, Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Gray, and Malvern Prep's generous EITC donors.
Moderating tonight's fireside chat is Cole Cherian, the chairman and co-founder of CSItizen. He's the leader of the Content Curation and Growth Strategy Impact Team.
Tonight, our scholarship speaker is Alex Jones. He is the CEO and co-founder. Round of applause for Cole. Round of applause for Cole.
Let's go, Cole.
Tonight, our scholarship speaker is Alex Jones. He is the CEO and co-founder of Hallow. He was raised a Catholic, but fell away from his faith at a young age, and meditation really brought him back to his faith and is the inspiration behind his app. His app has 2.5 million downloads, over 50,000.
Went to undergrad at Notre Dame, graduate school at Stanford, and worked professionally in consulting at McKinsey & Co. before going full-time at Hallow. He now lives in Chicago with his wife and daughter. And without any further ado, Alex Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Sumant and Alex. Thank you, Alex, for joining us here tonight. Really excited to share your story, your citizen moment, your advice for aspiring social entrepreneurs. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry for anybody who thought it was the other Alex Jones for any disappointment, but
yeah,
we'll try to be as interesting, but no promises.
Yeah, probably not as not as explosive as those comments, but
I'll be a little quieter.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
You know.
I think where we should start, for those of you who we don't have people in the audience who don't know about your story as much. Tell us a little bit about your early life.
Do you want me to kind of jump into the whole Hallow thing too, or just start with early life?
I think early life as it relates to Hallow.
So I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I was a Buckeye fan growing up. Was atheist and agnostic I was raised Catholic, meaning my mom dragged me to Mass and confirmation. But was atheist agnostic for most of high school and college. Went to Notre Dame for undergrad, was mechanical engineering. And then graduated and went into work at McKinsey in Chicago as a consultant, which I loved, happy to talk about. And I guess the Hallow story, I became fascinated with the idea of meditation, which unfortunately your guys' minds might be slightly more educated than mine, but my mind did not first go to St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, but to secular meditation, mindfulness, calm, headspace. And so I was about to go to India for a couple weeks, but then I found the Headspace app had just launched. This would have been 2014, 2015. And it was a lot cheaper than a flight to India. And so I started using it every day, and I thought it was awesome. It was this really helpful tool to sit before going to work for 10 minutes and learn this type of technique. But every time I would meditate, my mind would feel pulled towards something spiritual. In secular meditation, you focus on your breath for a while, and then you let your mind go at the end. And whenever I would let my mind go, I'd go towards something Christian, an image of the cross or Trinity or something, which I thought was super strange because I wouldn't have considered it an important part of my life. I was still agnostic. So I thought I had this revolutionary idea. I started talking to priests, brothers, sisters, folks who I knew from Notre Dame, friends who I knew who were deeper in my faith life, asking this question, hey, is there any way that there's some intersection between meditation and this faith thing? Because I'm feeling this weird pull. And they all said, yeah, we've been doing it for 2,000 years. You probably should have heard about it. It's called prayer. And obviously I had known about prayer. the stuff that I'd memorized as a kid, or the, hey, thanks for stuff, sorry for stuff, help me with stuff, but that I'd always just felt like I was talking to myself in my own head. And I started learning all about kind of this rich tradition of contemplative and meditative prayer that I'd never heard of before, like Lectio Divina, Ignatian spirituality, Carmelite spirituality, recollection, chant, all this stuff. And I sat down one day. Lectio Divina is how you meditate on Scripture. You pick a word that sticks out to you. Randomly opened up a Bible that was lying around to Matthew 6, Googled how to do Lectio Divina, and Hallow was the word that stuck out, and hallowed be thy name, from the Lord's Prayer. And it just changed my life, brought me to tears, brought me back to my faith. Never used to go to church, now go every day, pray every day. It's the most important part of who I am. But it's just this beautiful combination of like this, in secular meditation, you kind of get this sense of peace, like your stress goes down, your anxiety goes down, you can feel that. It was this beautiful combination of that combined with like this depth of meaning and purpose. So what does hallow mean, to make holy? Was I supposed to make God's name holy? Is he supposed to make my life holy? Am I letting him? Am I supposed to be helping other people grow in holiness? All of which the answer was no at the time. And so anyway, I knew I had to do that for the rest of my life, and I started failing miserably at trying to build Hallow, and luckily God fixed all the stuff that I screwed up. So.
Well, it's an amazing story. And honestly, your story that you talked about with opening the Bible is very reminiscent of something we know about St. Augustine here at Malvern. Opened up a book, pick up and read, and his Bible verse that really changed his life. I'm curious.
I was just as bad a sinner, not quite as good a saint as Augustine, so we're working on it.
You still got a couple years left, so figure it out.
We'll see.
But you talked about that moment, and we focus around here on the citizen moment, and that's the point in your journey when you commit to making an impact. So was that sort of the eureka moment for you that set the course for Hallow, or was there another citizen moment later down on the line that when you really got the idea for, hey, I could build something around this idea?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty selfish at the beginning. I was just like, this is awesome, I need to do this for myself. And I thought these apps were really cool ways to do it. And I'd always kind of wanted to learn how to build an app, so I learned how to code for an app, which is not that hard. You guys, free 2-week course. But yeah, it was mostly just for me to try to do this for the rest of my life. And if there was like a handful of other people, I'd always been interested in startups, but it wasn't really first a startup idea. It was just me trying to build something for myself. But we started talking to people, and people were like, maybe that would be interesting. Although everybody says that when you try to pitch them a startup idea, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. Your mom's never going to tell you it's a stupid idea, although mine did. I would never use an app to pray, that's what she said. But anyway, when we first launched the beta test, I guess the big moment for me, so we just shared it with like all our friends and family to start getting folks to use it and get feedback from them. And there was just like, and then we launched in like early December of 2018 with just like a handful of meditations on there and a Advent series of meditations. And my aunt was one of the couple hundred beta folks. And she started using it and used it for 15 days. My cousin had just passed away. Her son, her only son, had just passed away in his sleep. He had just gotten married, and they had just got pregnant with their first kid. He was 45 or so, totally random heart condition thing that he just didn't wake up. Obviously, it broke her heart, and she couldn't get out of bed or eat or do anything for a long time. And that was maybe like 3 or 6 months before we launched the app. And so we launched the app. And she sent me a note in like December, mid-December, and she just said, I still have it saved in my phone now, but she just said, look, every Christmas is a stressful and anxious time, especially as a grandmother, trying to figure out how I'm going to visit all my kids, how I'm going to get a bunch of gifts, travel, all this stuff. It's stressful and anxious. And like this Christmas, especially as the first Christmas I was going to face it without my son, I was facing it with an immense sense of dread and despair. And I just wanted to let you know that the only thing that's gotten me through these days have been meditating each morning on Scripture through the app and focusing on and remembering the meaning of the season of Advent, which is hope even in darkness. And anyway, obviously, I'm like half crying now, but I broke down in tears and was just like, man, if that's all I get to do in my life, that will have been worth it. And we get notes like that every day from folks where God is able to, you create a little bit of space in your life and God is able to do like truly miraculous things through it. But that was probably the biggest thing that was like, okay, maybe God can actually use this thing to help people, which was a cool thing to be a part of.
It's really an amazing story. I'm curious, you talked about you developing, an interest in at least creating Hallow because it was something that you needed, and then hearing about your friends and your family using it. What would you describe as your app's, I guess, key demographic? And like, how would you think about finding that if you were an entrepreneur?
I'd say high school students at Catholic schools somewhere close to Philadelphia
Gotcha.
area.
All right. Yeah, sounds good.
Is what I'd shoot
I know
for.
a few.
No, I mean, we started it for us, and so we thought, maybe young professionals or people just starting work who were interested maybe in some meditation stuff. But we also had folks on our team who went to Catholic school their whole life and were super Catholic, but never really had like a deep prayer or spiritual life, or never really felt like they had like a really deep personal relationship with God or contemplative or interior life. And so we knew that there was some diversity there, but we did focus on younger folks. But it ended up, our biggest spike still is like 25 to 35. We have a good chunk of 18 to 35 too, and we don't collect any of this, but there's no data below that because it's all private for minors. But it's a pretty evenly distributed thing, which really shocked us. So like 18 to 35 and 35 to 55 years old and 55 plus is like a pretty flat distribution. And there's a bunch of people, it was just, moms who are worried that their teenage boys are going to grow up to be atheists who want to pray with the app or want to learn how to pray as a family, or newly married folks who are trying to figure out their relationship with faith, people who've just had kids who are trying to figure out how they're going to raise their family, people who've just retired who are have a bunch more time on their hands, and folks nearing the end of their own life thinking about the bigger questions. And so we found it actually there's a bunch of different folks who are able to come to it and find value. So we don't really have a great answer for the key demographic, which is kind of nice because hopefully Jesus can reach everybody.
Yeah. And so you touched on this a bit, but you attended University of Notre Dame. It's where me and seven other Malvern guys. Yeah.
Yeah, change now while you still have time.
So me and seven other Malvern guys are going next year.
Got
a few of them.
Recorded. Notre Dame's great.
Can you tell us a bit about how it related, or how you developed as both talk about your journey as a social entrepreneur and your relationship with God, because I know you have interesting.
Through Notre Dame?
Yeah.
I was not a good kid at Notre Dame. It was a tough time for it was the pre-Augustine
Gotcha.
Bible hearing moments. Like my freshman year, I had the third call I had to call my dad was because I had ended up in the temporary jail under the football stadium for underage drinking, which was not a pleasant second
Yeah, I
call
can't
home.
imagine.
Yeah, I would not recommend
Yeah.
it. I would not recommend it. And then the cop came up to me and said, because my face was all flushed because I just called my dad and told him, hey, you just sent me to college for like 4 days and I'm in jail. And the cop was like, son, are you high on cocaine? And I was like, no. And he's like, oh, okay. I was like, that's it? That's the whole line of questioning? Anyway, so Notre Dame was tough for a handful of reasons. I was not a great person. And I guess towards the later part of Notre Dame, I focused a lot on like career and trying to be whatever successful was. But I did meet my wife at Notre Dame, so that's tough. And Notre Dame itself was phenomenal. I love the university. I mean, there's Father Pete McCormick, who when you go there, you got to meet, is one of the coolest priests to this day that I've ever met, and was always, I was always still somewhat connected to the faith because of him. And then as soon as I started wrestling with some of this stuff after graduating, I called him and sent him a bunch of emails, a bunch of Old Testament questions and a bunch of random stuff that he was kind enough to answer. And I met a lot of the co-founders. I mean, half of the Hallow team now is Notre Dame grads. So the network that you build and the friendships that you build is and I obviously owe my family, like my wife and my family, to Notre Dame. So it's a really beautiful, it's a beautiful university. They do a great job of like integrating faith in an authentic way while still having the benefits of like, sports and good classes and all that jazz. And it's a great education. Like I learned, I was a mechanical engineering major. I learned how to code. I learned how to do a bunch of different stuff while still getting exposed to business stuff and able to jump into whatever career I wanted. So I mean, Notre Dame itself was phenomenal to be able to have as a part of my life. I did not take nearly as good of advantage of it as I should have, but it was awesome.
Well, hopefully my mom won't be getting a call on my 4th grade out of jail.
It was not. My dad was a lawyer, so he was like, look, before you sign anything, you have to give me a call. And, you have to sign stuff. And so that was how that happened. But
yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Hopefully that doesn't happen to me.
So we covered my cousin passed away. We covered the jail. What other stories?
So I think maybe we jump back to Hallow. You had this idea, or you had sort of a concept. How did you go from idea to impact?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me and for anybody who's trying to do startup stuff is like just start trying to build it. Like, actually, there's only one decent book that, well, there's maybe two, but like 4 Steps to Epiphany was a decent one. But it's all about just talking to people, a lot of people, and trying to build something and test it as quickly as humanly possible. And it's really nice if you can build it yourself, or at least try to build it yourself. So I took like a free coding course and learned how to code an app and coded the first version of it, and we tested it, and I interviewed everybody who we tested it with, and then we tried to make it a little bit better and tried to make it a little bit better, and that's pretty much been, we brought on an engineer who actually knew how to code, and I was like, hey, could you like build the Android version and maybe make the iOS version a little bit better? And he was like, sure, but do you mind if I take like a week and delete all your code and rewrite it? And I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. So anyway, building the team was a super important part of being able to scale up. But the most important part was just starting on trying to build something. And it's really easy when you're a user yourself. Like if I was trying to build like an InsurTech thing or something, it'd be a lot harder. But since it's, I use it all the time myself, and I want to keep using it more, it's really easy for me to be like, this would be cool, or this looks like crap, or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, the starting, building, and coding and all that stuff was super important in terms of just not being afraid of it and just jumping in.
And was there anything that you felt you couldn't do and that added team members because of that?
I mean, I can't really do anything, but I pretended like I could do most of it. No, I think the biggest benefit of my Notre Dame education for engineering and then consulting afterwards was like, for Notre Dame, I felt like I had a decent enough, mechanical engineering is pretty much the broadest engineering discipline they have there, and I felt like I wasn't really scared of anything technical. Like I didn't really know what I was doing with anything, like I can't really do chemical engineering or aerospace engineering or any of that stuff, but I wouldn't be afraid of it if someone was like, okay, like, we're going to try to build a plane. I'd be like, okay, it'd probably take me a year or two to like figure this out, but I'm not afraid of it. And the same thing in consulting, it was like, okay, build a 5-year strategy for a Fortune 500 company, or like figure out this balance sheet or this cash flow statement or whatever. And which like at the beginning is, whatever, nobody knows what that is. That's a super intimidating thing. But once you get into it and you try to break these like really complex problems down and you realize that you can into like these little smaller pieces to get started, it makes it so like you don't feel afraid to be like, oh, we should build an app, or we should add content, or we should license something, or we should do whatever, hire people. But yeah, the team was super important. So I didn't know anything about theology, so we had some friends who were like much deeper in their spiritual life, and a guy in seminary and a handful of folks who were helping write the content. I really didn't know anything about audio editing, which was terrible. We ended up recording we like tried to record it in this apartment. It's way harder than you would think. And we ended up recording it in studio, we just booked the closest studio, and it happened to be the studio in Dallas where Post Malone recorded Congratulations, which was like, okay, that's awesome. And then we brought on an engineer who's an infinitely better developer than I was. And so the team was, I mean, getting a really great team is super important to building anything, any organization. And they end up doing the vast majority of the heavy lifting and have the best ideas. So the app I wanted it all to be purple, no other colors, just purple, and like with some mountains, which would have been hideous and was hideous when we first launched. And like my designer came in and was like, nah, let me just redesign the whole thing. So the value that having the right people around you is incredibly important.
And what was that risk like? You had a, mentioned, very secure job at McKinsey with, some prestige to it, and then you go and say, hey, I'm going to start this app and take a risk. What's it like doing that?
Well, my wife is certainly getting into heaven before me. Yeah, I mean, McKinsey, you make a good chunk of money. If you do well there, you can make a lot. And one of my co-founders was in investment banking at Goldman Sachs, and then went to private equity and was making more than I was making. And my other co-founder was in the same job as me, so we were financially incredibly blessed. We'd only been there for 2-3 years, but I mean, the risk for me was actually not nearly as bad as for the other two co-founders. For me, I had already decided to go to grad school in like 7 months. And so we started talking about the idea, and I was like, this is pretty easy. Instead of taking like 2-3 months off before school, I'm just going to take 7 and work on this thing full time, which I never would have been able to do or had the courage to do had I not had that like safer backstop. But I did have to, I don't know if you know anything about retirement savings, but you put a good chunk in retirement, and then you have to pay like a 35% penalty if you pull it out early. So I had to pull all that out early and max out my credit cards and all that stuff. So financially, I take out on like a super extra amount of student debt. So it certainly was financially very risky. But my wife was a teacher, and she was able to support the two of us while I was working on it and while we went to grad school. And she didn't quite have a perfect understanding of all the ridiculous things I was buying and spending on, so which probably wasn't the best marriage play, but so we were able to sneak some of that in. And then my two co-founders, actually, I mean, like the one guy just quit his job before we launched, and went from making a ton of money to making absolutely nothing. And the other one was like just about to get promoted to an incredibly important role that would have like automatically gotten him into whatever grad school he wanted to, and he quit like 2 weeks before because he just felt like I was calling him to do it. And so it's they actually took way bigger risks because they didn't have like the grad school backdrop to like I could. My dad didn't think I was making like a super terrible decision because I was like, I'm just going to screw around for like 7 months. Then I tried to drop out of grad school, and that was a different one. But anyway, so yeah, the risk was. And going to grad school, you kind of have a decent sense that you're kind of able to get a job afterwards. And consulting, you can always kind of go back to, which is the nice part. So it wasn't anything like crazy, but we certainly poured a bunch of our personal cash into it.
Yeah, it's a big risk.
It was negative cash, so we didn't have any cash. So we poured a bunch of our credit card debt into
it. You talked about grad school. You went to Stanford for your MBA. What was it like working to launch this religious app in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, it was certainly odd. It's not necessarily the Catholic hotbed of the world. Yeah, most people would be like, I probably pitched like 80 VC firms in the Valley. Has anybody seen Silicon Valley, the HBO show? No? Okay, you should watch it. It's hilarious. It's probably not age appropriate, so when you're older, but yeah, I mean, you had a bunch of really crazy conversations. People were like, you know what you should do? You should start a new religion. And I was like, I don't think you really get the point. And most people just didn't really get it. Like, I don't think people are religious anymore. And it's like, well, 14% of the U.S. meditates and 80% pray. So, maybe if you're in Silicon Valley and New York and L.A. and Chicago, it's a little bit different. But for the rest of the world and the rest of the country, it's a massive need for folks. And actually, like, the need for spirituality and how much folks are interested in it is growing. People aren't becoming atheists or agnostic, they're just becoming spiritual but disaffiliated from any particular religion, which I actually think is a promising thing for the church if we can lean into it. But anyway, so yeah, certainly a lot of weird pitches. Pitching at Stanford relative to, like, you know, the next TikTok or the next Robinhood or whatever was a weird one. But at the same time, you kind of like being weird in Silicon Valley. Like, everybody wants to, they don't actually do it. They all are like very consensus driven. They all actually think very similar, but they like to say that they're like really focused on doing stuff that nobody else would do, like the contrarian mindset. And so having an idea that does feel kind of contrarian, which is a Catholic startup, was kind of, you know, you meet with 80 people and only 10 are like maybe interested, and then of that maybe 5. But 5's a lot, so it's a super competitive. You've got 5 folks trying to be a part of it, and so having that as like a contrarian idea that maybe is a little bit different from the normal startup idea that they hear was fun. It was definitely not fun to pitch it, to work on it while I was in grad school. I probably was working 110, 120-hour weeks. So again, wife is saint, but was just an enormous. You don't get any of the doing a startup in grad school is like a exhausting thing. You don't get any of like the social parts of it. You don't get to meet people. You don't go on any of the trips. You just go to the classes that you're required to attend. My advisor was like, "You're like 1 failed credit away from not getting a degree," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't take any more credits." And the rest of it is just working real hard. But being able to be out there, the tech folks there are incredible. So being able to lean on them and learn how to build something that can help people was super useful.
So talk about those pitches that did go through and did work. You raised $50 million last year.
Yeah, the first one. So what you want in a pitch is you want something called a competitive round, which is if you don't get anybody, that sucks, right? Nobody says, hey. It's actually this really weird situation where you go and it's like Shark Tank or any of the stuff. You go and you say, hey, I've got a good idea, please, like, think it's a good idea. And they say, I think it's a stupid idea for these 8 reasons. You say, no, it's not a stupid idea for these 8 reasons. And then you see if you've convinced them. The interesting thing is, at the beginning, you don't really have anything. You just started it, so they're really just judging you. They're like, do I like you? You know, it's a really weird business. But what you want is a competitive round. So if you don't get anybody, you're screwed, obviously. If you get somebody, then that's fine, but then they're going to say, you're going to do it this way, and this way, and I'm going to dictate the terms of all this stuff, and you're going to raise as much as I tell you to raise. If you get just one other person, you can make it feel like you have 100, and you're like, oh, well, there's other competing offers with blah, 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 and then you end up being able to have a lot more control over how the process goes. So anyway, that was the goal. And so we got the first offer from somebody. We went, pitched him. I thought it was the worst pitch. It was this French guy, phenomenal investor. I thought it was the worst pitch I've ever given. I scored each of them, and I scored it a 4 out of 10. And then he came back and he was like, "Yeah, okay, we want to lead the deal, which means we want to invest." And that was when we were doing like we were raising like $3 million that first one. So he was like, "I want to invest like $2 million," which to me was like an insane amount of money. I was like, that's a crazy amount of money. But I really wanted to get just one other competitive thing, like one other offer from somebody. So I was all stressed because you're like constantly analyzing yourself of, am I being convincing? Have I thought through all the answers, all this stuff? And it's like super tight. Obviously, Hallow is like my own identity, like my little child, my soul. And so like when people critique it, you spend all day. If I had my daughter right here and everybody was like, she's not that great, is she? It'd be like, screw you guys. I'm getting a slap fight. It's a Will Smith joke, okay. Anyway, so I was super stressed out, and I just went back to my apartment, and I was just like, look, God, if this thing works, you're going to get all the credit. I'm not going to try to take the credit. You're going to get it. I know it's you. I know you're the one doing the heavy lifting. It's not me. I know I'm going to think that I'm arrogant, and I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm actually like really great, but I know that it's you, and I'm going to give you the credit. I promise. But if it fails, it's also on you. I'm not taking the blame for that, okay? If it doesn't work, then it's your thing. You do with it what you want, but if it doesn't work, I'm not taking the stress of that. And the next day, I show up to a coffee shop with this guy. His first venture investment was a check into Robinhood, which was the best venture investment of the last 15 years. But I showed up to a coffee shop with him, and it was our second meeting, and so he was going to tell me whether he liked me or hated me. And I went to get coffee, and I was reading the Daily Gospel because I didn't get a chance to read it in the morning. And it was the Gospel was Peter trying to fish and not catching any fish, and just trying, not catching any fish. And then Jesus saying, "Yeah, let down your nets." And he's like, "There's no fish out here, man. I've been fishing for like 4 years." And he's like, "Let down your nets." And he's like, "Nah, man, let down your nets." And he lets it down. He catches more fish than he can carry. And then 2 seconds later, that guy gives us our second term sheet, which was crazy. So anyway, Jesus definitely gets the credit. So that was the first one. And then the ongoing ones, it kind of changes from, hey, here's an idea, to, okay, what are the fundamentals of what you're building look like? Is it adding value to people's lives? Are they staying with it? Are you able to reach out to more folks? What does growing look like? And it's much more of like a more standard investing thing. And so we found somebody who was a power user of the app who had heard me pitch at Stanford like 2 years ago when we were first getting started. And she's phenomenal, Catherine Boyle. And she invested our next one, which was 12. And then we got another really incredible group of investors who wanted to invest the next one, which was 40, which was very quick after that. And that was Drive Capital, which is a Midwest-based fund, which I was a big fan of them. They're actually based in my hometown, which so I'd known of them for a long time. Teal and Teal Capital and all that jazz. So really, and like the only American who sits on the board of the Vatican Bank, Pope Francis appointed him. A handful of really phenomenal, like faith-based folks, and a handful of really phenomenal tech-based folks. And so it was kind of our goal to bring both together. So anyway, yeah, it's definitely a stressful process. Pitching is not a relaxing thing to do, but it's fun. You get feedback from folks, and it's helpful to kind of push you to make sure that you're building stuff in the right way.
So you talked a bit about now in these rounds, the most recent ones, you're talking about, not just the idea, but what you've done. So I have some stats. I know they're a little outdated. I got them from your press kit, so feel free to correct me. So you guys are currently the #1 Catholic app on the App Store. Still right?
Yeah.
All right. You have over 1 million downloads.
2.5.
2.5, okay. How many million prayers completed?
Like 60-ish.
60-ish? All right, 60 million. And you just raised $40 million last year in your last round. So in your opinion, how do you think Hallow is going to grow in the future?
Not by the grace of God, my man. The biggest thing for us is to create something that helps people and helps as many people as possible to grow deeper in a relationship with God. And the biggest way that we grow is by people trying it, having their lives changed through God. We've had like folks struggling with addiction, folks who have lost loved ones, folks who are dealing with suicidal thoughts or depression, folks who are nearing the end of their own life. People who and are able to find like deep peace in Christ through just taking time out and the simple tool to pray. And it's really the main way we grow is through folks like that sharing it. Or like anybody, just saying, hey, I think I have a cool app, check it out. Or like, a guy at a talk who tries to force all the high school students to download the app. But it's really just about people talking about it. And they talk about it, just to friends on Facebook groups or whatever. A good chunk of TikToks, Twitter, or parishes. Go to your parish and set up a kit or whatever to try to share it. So like sharing it with folks is super important. So that's the core. And then we do marketing stuff, and we do ads, and we try to reach out to new folks in different ways, and we partner with parishes, and we partner with schools to bring Hallow to universities or churches. And so there's a bunch of different ways that we're trying to get out there and reach folks. And then we're obviously, well, not obviously, but we're almost entirely based in the U.S., and so we've just started focusing on how do we help both Hispanic folks within the U.S. who speak Spanish primarily, or folks in Mexico or Brazil or Europe or Asia or any of that stuff. So focused on just trying to help as many folks as possible with as really phenomenal a product and content as you can to help them to build that habit of prayer and grow closer to God.
It's amazing. Yeah. So we've got a couple students here. What's your advice for aspiring social entrepreneurs? Someone who's maybe what would you tell 18-year-old Alex about entrepreneurship?
I tell 18-year-old Alex a lot. 18-year-old Alex would have been 10 years ago, 11 maybe, so that's 2010. So I would probably invest in Facebook would have been the first
Yeah.
thing.
Bitcoin?
Definitely Bitcoin. I had $100 worth of Bitcoin, and my co-founder told me that's a waste of money. I bought a single Bitcoin for $100, which is now 50 grand or whatever. And he was like, that's stupid, you should sell it. And I sold it to start Hallow. And I don't think it was the better investment, you know? No, I mean, there's a handful, like there's the tactical things and then there's the important things. I think the tactical thing, I mean, for entrepreneurs and startup folks, it was really helpful to me to like start thinking in that, in like how can I solve problems way, which like just get a group of friends or whatever and just be like every week, once a week or whatever, just be like, okay, what do we think we could do? And, you know, we could have a better, whatever, mic set up because that, you know, mic thing at the thing was kind of annoying, or we could have a better way to run these things or market these things or whatever it is. Just experiences in your own life. And when you start thinking about like, I mean, I think Jobs' quote was something like, you know, once you, the entrepreneur is the person who realizes that all the stuff that was built up around them was built by men and women no smarter than yourselves. And so like just trying to think in a way of like, how can I fix things? How could I build something better was pretty helpful to get in that mindset. And then once you have like a set of ideas, just trying to both talk to potential customers or users or, and just trying to build it. Like just try to build something. It's really easy to build a website. It's really easy to build an app to just get started. And just trying it and failing and trying it and trying to make it work. So that's like the tactical stuff. I think, you know, the biggest lesson that I've learned is it's not specific to entrepreneurs or whatever. It's just been really cool to watch, like when you try to invite God in, and I don't do a great job of it, but when you try, he like, it's not a theory. He like very tactically works in your life and does things for you. And like every big thing that Hallow has done is it was like that fundraising story. It was like, wait, yeah. Alex, you're going to try as hard as you can, and then as soon as you kind of try to give up, I'm going to give it to you. Just to prove to you that you're not doing it. And it's to me. And if I was just less stubborn, I would learn the lesson already. But he keeps doing it. It's like, okay, yeah, you're working real hard. And then you're like, you know what, I just can't get Father Mike on the app. And then he just randomly emails us somehow. Or working real hard to get a deal done or something, or find some way to grow. And then it just comes through, you know, a random team member idea or a random email or a random note. And there was a person I was talking to the other day whose wife had passed away. And he's young. And he said she lived the last year of her life as terminal cancer. And it was just this beautiful spiritual experience for her. And her, like, the only thing she kept saying was, we think that we're so in charge, like we think we're doing all this hard work. But at the end of the day, this whole thing, this whole life thing, this whole journey that we're here for is just a process to learn to surrender to God with joy. That's it. Which is like so dope. Like that's just exactly what it is. It's like you're just, and it's so much more freeing than like, oh, I'm going to try to build a big startup or whatever. No, we're just going to see what God does with it. And anything else is just really stressful and really anxious and tiring, or like, you know, am I going to find the right spouse, or am I going to, you know, how are my kids going to be? All that stuff is like, I just want to give it to God with joy and learn to do that, which is like the journey, obviously, of a lifetime to try to figure out how to do, but also the journey, obviously, of Hallow and what we're trying to both help people do and do ourselves is how do we let go, how do we let, you know, God make our lives holy, hallow our lives, and how do we try to surrender with joy?
It's amazing.
I don't think I would have listened at 18, but, you know.
It's good advice for an 18-year-old, whether they
said
take it
it
or not. You talk about the importance of prayer, and obviously that's what Hallow is based around. What advice would you give to someone who says, hey, maybe I'm not the best at praying, I want to get better, or even someone who is good at praying, thinks they want to get better?
Yeah, I mean, Mother Teresa struggled with it her whole life. a dryness in prayer, feeling like she wasn't connected with God. And read her diary. The best saints feel like they struggle with prayer. I think we all struggle. I mean, it's really tough to get heaven on earth, and God will give you like glimpses of himself, according to the saints, not me, but glimpses of himself, and then he'll give you periods of dryness and times when you don't feel like you're connected, you're just going through the motions or whatever. I think the most important thing is just to do it, just every day to just try to do it. Just take 10 minutes and just sit in silence, or just try to, maybe there's an app that might help you, guide you through some of that time. But just try to pray for 10 minutes every day for 3 years. If you show up, God will do the rest. If you just try to say, look, I don't think I'm doing this right, he'll do the rest. And there's a bunch of tools to help. But yeah, showing up is the hardest thing. And there's a bunch of different, I think the coolest part about Hallow is I get bored and obsessed pretty easily. And that's great. There's a bunch of different, the church has, it's not like, hey, I'm going to say the Our Father every day, which is a great thing to do. But you don't just have to do that every day for the rest of your life. There's 30 different really beautiful, really powerful ways to pray. So you try one, you get obsessed with it. Right now, for me, it's the rosary. I hated the rosary for a while, and now I'm obsessed with it. And you just try to see if it's something that is helping you grow closer to God and helping you grow deeper in love and service for your friends and loved ones. And if not, then try something else. There's a ton of really beautiful, really powerful stuff. Music, chant, the rosary, contemplative prayer, just sitting in silence, Lectio Divina, Ignatian spirituality, imaginative prayer, recollection. There's a really beautiful library of different ways to try to build a relationship with God. And so bouncing around those is fun and a cool way to get to know God in different ways. Or going on a hike and seeing the beauty of nature. I mean, there's just a bunch of really cool ways to try to grow closer to God and deeper in prayer.
It's a great answer. I find myself sometimes struggling with it, so it's really amazing to hear your perspective. Back to entrepreneurship, and this will be the last question before we go to the audience Q&A, but Peter Thiel's one of your investors in your last round, author of my favorite book, founder of PayPal, early investor in SpaceX, right?
Yeah.
So 0 to 1 is just one of my favorite books, and there's a piece of it where he talks about going into the pitch room, thinking about telling investors it's powerful when you disarm them. You said they'll tell you, here are the 8 things why I think your idea won't work. And it's powerful to disarm them by saying what you think won't work about your company first, or your fears about it first. So it's an interesting question. What were your fears in that pitch room, and what are your fears about Hallow now? And how do you grapple with that as an entrepreneur, your fears about the risks of it not working out? Surrender to God with joy is no, I mean, when we started Hallow, it was a 95% chance of failure, probably 98. When we did our seed round, it was probably 90-ish. When we did our next one, it was probably 70. At our last one, it's probably 60. We're probably 55 right now. But still more than likely not going to work out. It's a startup, super early stage startup, which working on something like that and letting that go and letting that be a part of it is freeing. We're not really trying to build, I'm not really focused on, it'd be awesome if we built a company that lasted for 100 years. I mean, like a General Motors. But even General Motors is probably only going to last for, it's not going to last for 1,000 years. I mean, only the church has done that. And so knowing that you're kind of building something that, may or may not work out is freeing. It's okay, we're going to try to build something big, try to take this wherever God is asking us to take it, and maybe make a little dent in the church's trajectory, maybe help the church out a little bit. Maybe the little line that's going this way, priest ordinations starts to flatten a little bit. Maybe people start praying just a little bit more. Maybe people start going to church maybe a little bit more. And you build something, maybe you just try to throw a dent in the world. And if not, it's a fun way to spend 4 years. Most of us only spend 2-3 years at a career nowadays anyway. And so it's a cool way to spend, 5 to 10 years of your life. It's awesome. Now, hopefully I get to work on this for the rest of my life. It's the blessing of a lifetime to get to work on. But being able to be okay,
this may or may not work out is pretty freeing for a lot of things in life, except for marriage. That one definitely has to work out forever. In terms of there's a bunch of stuff in a startup world that could go wrong. You could lose a really important person, which is the most, having the right team is super important. It's a small team at the beginning. You could lose somebody who's really valuable. If we lost our engineer right now, our lead engineer, we have a handful of engineers, but especially at the beginning, who's the only person who knew the whole code base, that could have been dead. You get one bad article. So we were about to launch, the week of our launch, and somebody called us and said, maybe 200 people were using our app, and somebody called us and said, hey, I'm going to write something for a big Catholic publication that says Hallow's not actually Catholic. We're like, well, that would be the total end of Hallow, so why? And she was like, well, because there's too much time in silence and not enough guidance or whatever. And we're like, okay, yeah, let's change that and make this blah. And then she ended up writing an article that was like, Hallow is super Catholic, you guys all should use it. And it was amazing. And then 2 days after that, we were going to try to launch it. And we launched the app, and it's midnight. And I go to upload all the final audio, because we just got done uploading the audio. And the whole app not only freezes, but turns your entire phone white, and the home button and the lock button, and nothing works. Nothing. And I was like, how? I didn't even know an app could do that to a phone. And
it's innovation right there.
Anyway, so then we stayed up that whole night, and we were able to launch it by 3 p.m. the next day or whatever, trying to fix it. But anything could. The core thing for us in terms of our mission is, how do you reach out to new folks, and how do you help all the folks that you can to grow in as deep a relationship with God as possible? And what that means is, how do you grow, how do you reach new folks, and how do you provide value to the folks that you're serving, which is best measured in the consumer app world by retention, whether you keep using it. If it's a dumb app, you're never going to use it again. Whether you're paying for it or watching it or whatever, you're not going to use it. If you're not using it, you don't like it. It's not adding value to your life. And so we have to build something that's adding value to people's lives. And if we ever get to the point where people are like, maybe Hallow's not the thing, maybe it's not that much of a value. Maybe we taught the whole world to pray, so that's phenomenal. We could sit back and retire. That'd be a pretty crazy life. But, or maybe it's really hard for us to reach out to new folks. And new folks aren't finding out about Hallow, and people stop sharing it, and churches stop talking about it, and, whatever. Those two things could easily, either one of them, that is all of Hallow. So if any one of those stops, if we stop reaching out to new folks at the same rate, or if folks stop finding value in the app, then the app dies. So it's, which is petrifying to think about for more than 5 seconds, until you then say, oh yeah, all of life is just about learning to surrender to God with joy, which is true. So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that could go wrong, but so far God has fixed all the stuff that we've screwed up, so hopefully he keeps doing it.
Hopefully. I think so. I've used the app, and it's a great thing. This is an awesome conversation. Excuse me. We're now going to open this up to audience Q&A. Sumant is going to moderate that. We have Peter and Lewis running around with mics, so if you have a question, just raise your hand, and we'll get a mic to you. Sound good? All right. Sumant.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we have a lot of Notre Dame commits out in the audience today.
Go Irish.
So I have a little 1-2 about Notre Dame.
All
So
right.
the first question is, what are some of your top 2, top 3 favorite memories from your time there?
I was on the sailing team, which I would recommend. It's fun, not that hard, and you can show up to practice whenever you want. There were some pretty intense, I almost completely froze to death in the middle of some Lake Michigan sailing thing that was freezing cold with one of my good friends. I was wearing a dry suit, which means that you wear it like I would wear this outfit underneath it, and it is totally insulated. It keeps you totally dry, except my dry suit had a hole right here, and so my whole outfit was just soaking wet in terms of freezing cold water. And the lady who was running the race was like, it was Lake Michigan, Chicago, in almost the middle of winter, and she was like, by the way, if you're in the water for more than 2 minutes, you're probably going to die, so we're going to try to get you as quickly as possible. And so anyway, that was really fun, actually. The sailing experience stuff and that race too, and then definitely meeting my wife. I mean, best thing that ever happened to me. I don't have to get too gushy on it, but yeah, we met in like junior year in a dorm room because she was invited to go on a date with one of my friends, but then she brought a friend, trying to communicate that they were just friends, and then my friend and I worked it out separately, and yeah, so that was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. So it was definitely a good memory.
All right, and this second question about Notre Dame is a bit of a heavy hitter.
Let's hear it.
Best and worst foods in the dining hall.
You know, I was south. So there's 2 dining halls at Notre Dame, north and south. I was south for sure, right, which you guys will know if you go there. You have to pick, as friends, when you walk into the dining hall, you have to pick, there's 2 halves of the dining hall, and then you either go right or left. So you have to tell your friends where you're going to meet them, so right. The omelets on Saturdays, there's this guy who just sit there and make really phenomenal omelets, like scrambled omelets or whatever. That was really good. And then they did this pretty good. I think it was either like a Christmas one yeah, I think it was a Christmas one, like a prime rib. They did a big prime rib night one night where they like have all these fancy stuff and they make a big deal out of it. So, yeah, those are the big foods.
Got it. Just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, you can walk up to one of them.
Hi, thanks so much for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited about what you're doing. One of the things that just happened is that the Pope has asked, because of this upcoming synod, for the first time in my life, the Pope is actually soliciting input from Catholics about what are our observations about the Church, where are there opportunities for the Church to grow, to meet the needs of its people. And I thought that was a really exciting thing that for the first time that's happening. I'm just curious, based on your own spiritual journey, but also the fact that you've basically witnessed at least pieces of different people's spiritual journey since you started this app, what would your pitch to the Pope be in terms of, you talked about pitching investors, but what would you pitch the Pope in terms of where the Church is going and how we can better engage people in a robust prayer life?
Yeah, I think it's an awesome question. I see those like the fill-out things on all the churches with paper and pen. I do not want to be the person who has to collect 1.3 billion paper and pencil surveys. I mean, the biggest thing that gets me excited, I feel like, and one of the big opportunities, at least in the West, which is just what I know best right now, is like I think if you go back over the last 20-ish years, folks have done a really phenomenal job of like explaining what the truth of the faith is in a really authentic way. Like Father Mike and Bishop Barron do a phenomenal job of this, where it's like we're not dumbing it down. This isn't just some old guy in the sky who judges people. There's actually really deep and really beautiful philosophy and theology behind this thing. And behind all the sensitive topics we can dive into, like it's not just that we hate XYZ group of people, it's that there's a deep theology and philosophy behind it. I think what happens, what we haven't done as great a job of is leading with like the peace and spirituality of our faith. And I think especially for younger folks, I just, my guess is that that's a really powerful way in. I think like what people tell you in Silicon Valley when you're building an app is what people think they should do. So people stop using an app, right? The key is to try to keep people using it, right? You want people to retain for a long time because that's great. What most people do is they say, okay, who's all maybe 100 people started using it and 70 dropped off. Let me go talk to the 70 who dropped off and ask them why. And what they'll say is, well, I didn't have time, or if it costs money, it's too expensive, or some other reason. It doesn't actually add that much value. Everybody's only got 24 hours in the day. If they're not giving you time, it's just because it's not a good enough reason. And if they're not giving you money, it's because it's not valuable enough to them. The more important thing is going to the people who use it every day and love it and will never stop using it, and say why. Why are you using it every day? And then trying to make that 30 like 32%. So you use it every day because it helps you fall asleep. Okay, maybe we could help you fall asleep a little bit, or maybe we could help you listen to music. And I think if you went and did that same thing to the church, you'd say, okay, why are you leaving the church? Which we have a bunch of those surveys. And it's, well, because I disagree with this political issue, or I disagree with this political issue, or I don't understand this teaching, or I disagree with this teaching, or I've had a bad experience, a terrible tragedy in my life that was associated with the church, which are all important things to address. But I think the way that we could add more value is you go to the person who goes to Mass every day, every morning, and you go to the person who's sitting in the middle of the church at 2 a.m., standing in front of the Eucharist, and you say, why are you here? And they say, because that's God, and this is how I have a relationship with God. Like, this is my spirituality. This is part of my life, which is what I would say. And I think, especially when you look at younger people, you see, you know, the number of people who call themselves religious in the U.S. went from like 65% to 55% in the last like 7 years, which is crazy fast drop-off. But it's not replaced by people calling themselves atheist or agnostic. It's replaced by people almost entirely, all 10 points of that is replaced by people calling themselves spiritual but not religious, which you can get into an argument of like, well, what is spirituality disconnected from religion? And there's no real, like, you have to have a belief system, and here's the theology behind, you know, why you can't be spiritual without having some sort of belief system. But instead, you could also just say, okay, you're interested in spirituality. There's actually a really great place for spirituality, which is, you know, this thing that might be called the church. And how can we introduce you to this beauty and the power of the spirituality of the church? And when you have, like, I can't, if I were you guys, I would have lost my mind a long time ago. Like, my little sister is, like, a senior in college, so a little older than you. Gets, like, 7,000 Snapchat notifications because she's got, like, 800 streaks at 450 or whatever that she needs to keep up every day. I mean, the stress and anxiety that just, I mean, I could barely manage, you know, texting. Or even social media gets me too stressed out. And so being able to reach out to folks and be like, hey, you know, maybe chill. Like, it's okay. Just take some time and try to sit in silence and find some peace in your life. I think that's the appeal of meditation. And I think it's an opportunity for the church to say, hey, we actually, I mean, there is no better peace than the one that Christ offers. And we can reach out to people with that. Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. Anyway, I think all of them are important. Like, the theology is important. Addressing the tough issues is important. Fixing all the really crappy parts of the church is important. But I think there's this opportunity to lead with the spirituality that gets us excited.
All right, my next question. Oh, go ahead, AC, my bad.
You're trying to make me look bad with the tie, man.
Sorry.
Okay, we should have rocked hoodies together.
So I know you talked a lot about the messages that you guys receive back from the Hallow users. Do you have a certain or particular message that you got back from a user that really stood out to you, or that you could see that, wow, like, God really intervened in their life, or that's God, like, right there? Do you have, like, a certain one?
Yeah, man, this is my favorite question of all time. Yeah, I've got a bunch that just stick with me. I mean, it's just incredible. Like, you don't, to think that God's able to do this type of stuff in people's lives is insane. There was somebody who wrote us that said their friend had 7 days left to live. They were diagnosed with terminal illness, and they were too intimidated to pray and had never prayed before. But they wanted to try, and they didn't know how. And so she pulled out the app, and they prayed the rosary for the last 7 days of their life. I mean, like, praise God, man. That's, like, the coolest thing I've ever heard. There's somebody who hadn't been to church in 30 years who was carrying around this enormous guilt and sin from her earlier life. And she started praying with the app, and then was inspired by the Holy Spirit to go to confession. Said she felt like a cinder block had been lifted off her shoulders, and ended up going to Mass the next day for the first time in 30 years. And said she described the app as a arrow sent straight from the Holy Spirit to her soul. There was somebody who was struggling with suicidal thoughts, a young person struggling. And they were talking about it in class, and she, you know, it was overpowering, and so she ran to the bathroom and pulled out the app and meditated on Christ, saying, "My peace I leave you, my peace I give you." And she found a sense of peace. Somebody struggling with addiction for years who's able to find some sense of hope. Somebody struggling with body image issues or body dysmorphia and eating disorders who hated themselves, and for the first time was able to hear you know, God saying that they call them, God saying that I love you as you are. There's a kid who was like, prayed, a mom and a 7-year-old kid were in the car going to Mass, or going to, I have no idea, driving, and they were praying with the thing, and the kid said, "Mommy, I think I just heard Jesus talk to me for the first time." It was just like the coolest stuff, like to be able to be a part of I mean, it's an incredibly humbling opportunity to be able to be a small part of the miracles that God is working in people's lives. And yeah, we get stuff like that every day. So it's just I'd be crying constantly if I didn't have a little bit more control of myself.
How you doing? Thanks for what you're doing. It's really great.
Thank you for having me.
So 2 quick questions. One related to the earlier question, and you kind of hinted at it a little bit. What advice would you have for the young people in the room about social media? And the second question is, where do you go next with Hallow, given the looming metaverse and virtual reality?
The metaverse. That's a great question. I mean, honestly, I don't know the answer to social media for myself. It's incredible. I mean, what they've discovered with TikTok and Reels is the most addictive thing, personally, I've ever experienced. I mean, it's just like, you'll sit there and like an hour will go by, and you'll just be like, what was I doing for an hour? Or you'll be like tired and in bed, and you'll just be like, I'm going to stay up for another 2 hours, I guess, just scrolling through nonsense. There's absolutely nothing. And then you like convince yourself, well, some of them are inspirational or educational, some of them are funny. And, or the same thing, like Netflix is the same. Like I'll watch like a season. I'm a very addictive personality. So, I'll watch like a season of something in a day. And when I was a kid, I watched like all 7 seasons of Lost in like a month in the summer, and I just never didn't emerge from my room. It was like Hulu had first come out. And I don't know, I think you do have to, there's 2 things. One, I mean, I think fasting is incredibly important, like both as a daily thing, even without social media, but to just say, hey, I have a friend of mine who, and I'm doing it now for Lent, but my phone's only going to be on the kitchen table or plugged into the wall. So I can go over and I can sit and scroll and respond to messages or see whatever my friends are up to, but I have to sit at the kitchen table, which is just not as comfy as the couch, or just not in my bedroom. There's, taking a day where you just don't look at your phone at all. Sundays is a good day for that. Or going through, like for Lent, I'm going to fast from all social media, and just pulling yourself out of it and making sure that you still have like self-discipline and something that is heavily addictive. But yeah, I think you just have to, for me, I think it is the table thing of trying to keep it not where I can sit on a couch for a while and do it. But if anybody figures it out, please let me know, because some of the social media stuff is insane. The second thing is I do think you can use it, anything, God can use essentially anything as an opportunity to reach into people's lives. And so I do think social media, there's a lot of, Bishop Barron, Father Mike, Scott Hahn, Sister Miriam, the media nuns or whatever, there's a bunch of people doing really cool evangelizing work and really cool theology work and really cool spiritual work in TikTok or in social media. And so there is an opportunity to take both your phone and download maybe an app, it's maybe purple, and use it as a way to like give that space to God and try to bring God into that space. And also working, like trying to build things or trying to post things or trying to share things and trying to do something good with the tool that God has given us. I think the same thing is true for the metaverse. Actually, the metaverse is great for me because like the eyes thing give me a headache, so I can only do it for like 30 minutes, which is phenomenal. I'm sure they'll fix that. But then, yeah, it's going to be insanely addicting, and it's essentially Ready Player One. It's just a crazy world to imagine. At the same time, how cool would it be to like sit and meditate on the Mount of Olives with somebody playing Jesus, with Jonathan Rumi or Caviezel or somebody just like leading you in a meditation, or walking through the Holy Land without having to pay, the 10 grand to go do a trip. I think there's a lot of cool opportunities to use the tools that folks are creating for God's work. At the same time, I think it's, they're all incredibly dangerous and incredibly addictive, and there's an infinite number of bad things that could happen on them, and you have to be able to control your relationship with it, and you have to have some sense of discipline, which is just really hard. So it's just a battle that we all have to figure out. Mine was, I guess, yeah, so you guys, TikTok would have come out a little bit ago, so mine was like Netflix. probably. Maybe that's a little bit later. So yeah, it's just like learning how to, and then, TV was super addictive before that, television, radio, so it's getting better and more difficult. So life as a young person now is much harder, but just trying to build that sense of discipline and that sense of control is an important part of a Christian life, even without technology. Exodus 90, by the way, I don't know if anybody's done it, but it's super. I would highly recommend it for the young men in the room.
So as someone going to Notre Dame next year, what advice would you have for me or any other seniors going to college next year to take advantage of the 4 years and be successful?
I mean, it's an awesome time to try stuff out career-wise. And so there's a bunch of stuff at Notre Dame that you can use to do that. The SIBC is a big club on campus that you can do a bunch of different types of industries, like little projects for different companies. And you kind of get to see how those companies work and what kind of work they do. So from a career perspective, trying things out, and if you're like of an entrepreneurial bet, just trying to build stuff, and you have professors on campus and you have enough time to try to screw around and do stuff. It's obviously important to study and all that jazz. The most important thing that I got out of Notre Dame was relationships with people, and not like parties or whatever. You don't really build relationships with people at parties, but like friends and people you live close with, and they end up becoming some, if you're lucky, some of the best friends that you'll have, which is incredibly valuable in a bunch of different ways. And then there are a bunch of really amazing priests and faculty at Notre Dame. And so taking the time to get to know them, which I didn't do nearly as good a job, but taking the time to get to know them is, just go up after class and say, hey, can we go grab a coffee or whatever? And everybody loves to do it, especially as a freshman. Like, it was actually one of the better pieces of advice. Like when you first start anything, whether it's a new job or when you're new at school, everybody's willing to talk to you because they'd feel bad if you didn't. Like if an 8th grader or whatever came to you guys and was like, hey, can somebody tell me what high school is like? You'd be like, of course, like I'd love to. And the same thing at Notre Dame, or you start a new company, it's like, hey, I just started, like, can I get my, and it's a really easy way to build relationships with folks. And then, yeah, prayer is nice, so you should try it.
All right, we got time for one more question.
So as someone who's going to Notre Dame next year?
Gosh, everybody.
I'm just kidding. So you said that you wanted the app to be purple, and then you had your designer come in and scrap that. Also the coding, your engineer came in.
What did you do, Alex? That's what you're about to ask? What did you actually
I'm going to ask,
add?
was it difficult for you to take the back seat and kind of let them, you said it was like your baby. Was it difficult for them to just change your baby?
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. Baby changing is always very difficult. Yeah, I mean, it's still hard. It's like as a founder, it's the hardest. You talk to any founder, it's the hardest part of building a company, especially because you end up like I used to edit all the audio that was on the app. I used to listen through all the audio for sure. Right now I can't because I don't have enough time in the day. I still listen to most of it, but eventually I won't be able to. We add more stuff every week that's like hours long, and so it is hard to. What you end up doing at a startup was like the analogy that was given to me was from some guy who was super into superheroes, but it starts off and you're kind of like it's a Spider-Man solo movie or a Captain America solo movie, and you're just trying to fight the bad guys, and then. It turns into a movie where you get a sidekick, like a Batman and Robin. And you have like one or two folks that are kind of working with you, but you're still kind of leading the way and you're fighting the people. And then it's an Avengers movie where you've actually got a lot of superheroes that are a lot better than you at whatever you're doing. And so you're still kind of leading the team, like you're still kind of Captain America, but you can't do what Iron Man's doing, you can't do what Spider-Man's doing, like they're better. And you can't do what Hulk is doing, like they're better at that than you are. And so your job is just to try to lead people in the right way. And then eventually it turns into, and this is probably like around a couple hundred people organization or 1,000. like you're Professor X, and your job isn't to fight people. Your job is to like set up the system that trains people to fight people, and like how do you set up the school and train the people who are then training other people. And so anyway, the evolution of that, like the hardest part of it is letting go and trying to build. The important part is you have to build trust in the people that you're working with, and letting go of the like really. I'm like I care really about the font. I like know when a little pixel is one off to the right or one off to the left, and so learning to try to give other people a chance to run with stuff is definitely hard. That being said, it's definitely the most rewarding part, and it's definitely where like the best things get done. I mean, this illustration thing is a great example. The app was all purple, and it was all purple mountains. The designer came to me. Again, I was paying this guy off like my credit card bill that was like a month past due or whatever, or my retirement savings account. So I didn't really want him to work like 2 weeks on doing nothing. And he was like, hey, I have an idea. Can I just take like 2 weeks? And I was like, you still got to get the thing done. And he was like, okay, like I'll just 50% of the time. And I was like, okay. And then he came back, and it was just clearly way better. And that's, I guess, the thing that I've realized with myself is like, I do not usually, when I come up with the thing, come up with the right thing right at the first time. But it is really easy for me to know when something is way better, whether I made it or not. And so this guy came, and he was like, look, this is what the app could look like. And it's like, that's just so much more beautiful than just all purple. And you're right, it doesn't feel like all the worries that I had in my mind. This is just so much better, like different cover art for each thing. And so, like, yeah, it's taken, maybe 40 of those times where somebody was like, come on, I really want to try to do this thing. And I was like, nah, I don't know. And they're like, yeah, really. So just having the people on your team, and I think, I've tried to build it in a way where it's like, or the culture of the team is super important, where it's like, it's not, you have to feel like it's your thing. Like, it's not my thing. It's a startup, so we're all owners in the thing. And it has to feel like it's your thing. Like if it sucks, it's your thing. You built it. So the designer is like, I want to make something that I'm proud to show people, which I also want to do. And then maybe there's a conflict every once in a while. But that like, I feel like I own it. Then even if I'm being stubborn, they're like, nah, you're actually wrong. Like I'm confident you're wrong. This is going to be way better. And that has always worked out. But yeah, it's certainly not. It's certainly a very difficult thing to like learn to let go. But if you have the right people around you, it makes it easier. And if you learn to surrender to God with joy, it makes it a little bit easier. Did I say that enough? Did I get that line in enough?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. I'll reintroduce Cole, and he'll close us out for the night.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Alex, thank you so much for sharing your story, your citizen moment, your advice for social entrepreneurs, which is summed up with the words. You can say it one more time.
Surrender to God with joy.
Exactly. I'm definitely taking that advice. It was amazing to hear. And thank you to our audience for coming, both in person and virtual.
I would never, it's a Thursday night, right?
Yeah.
Thursday night in high school?
Yeah.
I mean, going to a talk about like productive things.
Well,
that's a pretty impressive thing for a bunch
pretty
of high school
impressive
kids
speaker.
to show
Pretty
up.
impressive speaker.
I mean, it wasn't the real Alex Jones, though. You know what I mean?
We'll get him one day.
Yeah,
we'll get him one
have
day.
put my face on the posters. You should have just.
Our next event will be on May 9th. There will be a Citizen Summit. It will start with impact presentations given by student social entrepreneurs from Malvern, Academy of Notre Dame, and Villa Maria. That'll be in the St. Augustine Center before the speaker. We'll also have the Pizza Wagon food truck in the quad. It's really good Neapolitan pizza. It's fire. And then, I'm really excited for that part. And then we're going to finish off with the premiere of our scholarship speaker, Chris Long, two-time Super Bowl champion, Walter Payton Man of the Year.
Wow.
And
Showing me up.
well, I'm not done. He's also the
He's
founder.
also the starter of the #1 Catholic Avenue.
He also founded Conquering Killy and Waterboys as part of his Chris Long Foundation.
Great.
Alex, again, we're so grateful for having you here. Your donation of time, for those of you who don't know, your donation of time made it possible for the St. Teresa of Avila Citizen Scholar.
It's a better name than Alex Jones.
Yeah, better than Alex Jones. Citizen Scholar to come to campus. It's a 4-year scholarship for a high-achieving student with high financial needs. So
That's awesome.
really grateful for your donation of time
Praise
that made
God.
that possible.
Very cool, man.
And I really, give a round of applause for Alex for that.
Round of applause for you guys pulling this off. Very impressive.
Thank you.
Awesome stuff.
So we hope to see all you on May 9th. That'll be the last time that our founding team runs a Citizen event before we graduate and go off to Notre Dame. I hope that we're able to share your story in a positive way and hopefully inspire you in the audience to find your Citizen moment. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Awesome work.